Hey, welcome back to another HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan. We have good conversations with good people, and any conversation worth having, good conversation worth having, is worth having drunk. Cheers, my friend.
Catherine said it wasn't quite 5 o'clock yet, so
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Still cheer with water.
It is 5 o'clock somewhere. So we've got on Catherine Barris. She is with BDR. She is a profit coach and trainer with them. Started in the trades a mere 22 years ago.
30 years.
30 years ago now. 22 years at the company you were working with, 8 years now with BDR.
Yes.
Was supposed to be a temp job.
For 1 week.
Supposed to be there for a week as a dispatcher. Eventually worked her way all the way up to service manager, worked in marketing as well, worked on the commercial side of the business as well, and then eventually as a general manager before your role with BDR. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Someone who has a wealth of knowledge in and around every aspect of an HVAC business.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I hear some of the stuff come out of my mouth, I'm going, man, I really do know a lot in this industry, don't I?
Absolutely. Well, and all the aspects that come into a successful business. So definitely a conversation that we thought would be very, very pertinent to the industry and something that we feel like you can add a lot of value back to our listeners. So I guess walk us through your journey and some of the things that came up along the way as you continue to progress in your career.
Sure. Yeah. 30 years ago, walked into a very male-dominant industry. We'll say that. It's kind of been part of the theme in this convention that we've been at all week. But it was something that I had no intentions on ever doing. It just happened to be a friend of an acquaintance and, you know, a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing that needed help. And I stepped in, and they were surprised that I did everything they asked me to do while the person that I was filling in for was on vacation. Gee, go figure. I just show up and did what you asked me to do, and then they hired me permanently.
You said it was a 1 week temp role, and you just stuck around for 22 years.
For 22 years.
I mean, isn't that the dream, though, as a business owner, to hire the person that does what they're supposed to?
Yes, you know, I suppose it is, but I didn't realize how hard it was to find people to do what they were supposed to do until I stepped into the business world, of course. But yeah, it was an amazing journey. You know, it was a very small company too that I walked into. We had a total of 5 employees, including myself, when I first walked into this company. And we had 2 owners. One was an installer, one was a service technician, and we had a sheet metal person, and then myself, and then one of the owner's wives was the bookkeeper per se. And we just started growing from there. We hired our first official service technician, and then we acquisitioned another company. And that's when all heck broke loose. So we acquisitioned another company who was wanting to sell. And then from there, we had another company approached us. Well, if you're buying, let's go ahead and sell you mine too, right? And before you knew it, we had 25 trucks on the road. And things got out of hand really quick. You know, when you grow that fast, you just don't know what you're doing. And luckily he kept me along for the whole ride. And it turned out to be an amazing journey. We grew together, and with one of the owners had actually bought out the other owners. And then it was just reduced to one owner. And he recognized leadership skills in me that I didn't know was there. So I was very appreciative of that. And it was a great ride. You know, it's the more busy you get, and this is a very stressful industry. It's a very stressful industry. And I have a little secret about another portion of my life. I'm also a fitness instructor. That was kind of my first career, and it became a hobby career after I started working in the industry. And people would ask me, well, how do you not take all that home with you? I said, well, I teach kickboxing about 3 days a week. I get on that bag. Yes. I get on that bag. I punch, I kick, I scream, and I holler, and I jump around. And when I go home, I'm happy. And my husband's like, how was your day? I was like, oh, it was terrible. He's like, but you're in a great mood. I said, it's because I left it on the bag.
Well, it's stress relief, right? Finding something that is a healthy way to release the stress is, I think, an important part of everybody's life, right?
Absolutely.
Whether that's, you know, kickboxing, working out. I mean, generally physical activity is one of those ways to really release a lot of stress.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One question I wanted to go down, and we've had a lot of people talk about the acquisition process from the owner side in buying another company. But I'm curious to know what it's like being an employee of a company that is going out and, you know, acquiring businesses and merging them together. What was that process like? And if you were to give some advice to either somebody selling their business or somebody acquiring another business to keep their employees at the forefront when this process happens, what would you tell them?
Wow, that's a great question. It's stressful because there's uncertainty that comes along with it. You know, whenever there's uncertainty, people get nervous and they want to leave. And I recently actually had a client that was considering selling and they were in the process of doing it. And when they announced it to the rest of the team that it was happening, one lady said, "Nope, not doing this." And she put in her 2 weeks notice immediately. That's a scare because even though you're selling, and this particular company ended up not selling out, something happened at the deal at the end of it anyway, and they ended up not selling. But the uncertainty and people jumping jobs, nobody wants to jump jobs, but nobody, I can't say nobody, but people are afraid to stick through the troublesome part of that acquisition. The key is just be open with people, talk to them about it. You know, as an employee standpoint, meet with the owners and ask them, what can you do to, where are we going? Are they going to keep us? First, we got to know what their plans are.
Mhm.
And a lot of the acquisitions that are happening, though, they want the people to stay and they want to continue with that work because they want it to act as its own entity, And as long as you're providing the employees and everybody that's been with you information, assurance, and just give them guidance on what their expectations are. And I think that's where a lot of companies, when I'm talking with some of the non-managerial roles, when I'm in the businesses talking to the service technicians and the dispatchers and salespeople, they're all just like, they feel like they're left in the dark.
Right.
And I assure them, hey, there's a process, have the meetings, talk it through, ask the questions, go to the sources and ask the questions. Don't talk to each other about it, because if you're just building on it and your discussion, your concerns with your coworkers, they're only going to build on it. It's just human nature. And then all of a sudden you have a lot of uncertainty. Go to the source, ask the questions.
No, I love that. And it's interesting because we had a conversation with Patrick Lang from Business Modification Group as a business broker. And he talked about announcing too early. Like, wait till you have that check in hand before you start talking to your team. How do you balance that aspect of it and talking to your team too early when the deal could fall through and now you've put your team at an uneasy state versus
and that's
being transparent?
So in this instance, they were signing the paperwork the next day.
Right.
And it fell through.
Right.
So they didn't wait. And you're absolutely right. There has to be a certain level of making sure that we have all of our ducks in a row, all of our I's dotted, our T's crossed before we announce it to the team. There will be secrecy behind it. And it's not that it's meant to be secrecy, but why upset the whole organization if it's not for certain that it's going to happen? So I agree with that 100%. But once it is announced and once it is out there, then we want to make sure that we're communicating, having the meetings and discussing it with everybody that's involved.
Right. No, it makes sense.
The other part of it too is if two companies are merging together, let's say one has a phenomenal customer experience and the other one has a shitty customer experience.
Well, let's say mediocre.
Well, we'll go with mediocre. Mediocre customer experience. How can you when you combine the companies together? Because I know one of the things that you do is you work on customer experience, you work on the referrals, and that's a big part of the coaching that you do to increase profitability that way. When you have one that's great and you have one that's mediocre, how do you blend that and bring the mediocre up to a higher level of customer experience and in customer satisfaction?
Great question. Customer service is very difficult on many different levels, especially when you have multiple people. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday during the breakouts was we have to have a consistent training process in place. It has to be culturally developed and driven for everyone to deliver the same processes and the same delivery method. So especially when you're combining those two different types of, or those two teams, the key is just communication. If we can close the gap on the communication with everybody, it improves our chances on our customer service delivery millions of times. And even not of just our customer service, but just with accuracy in what we're doing, finding out the reason that people are calling. That was one of the things that we talked about yesterday. It's so simple as to just ask the right questions, Make sure that we have a process, write out the questions. We scripted everything. We have an interview form that we use during the sales process. When we're taking that during the call intake process, we have a certain list of questions that we should be asking consistently. And if you have one person doing it, it's even better. That one person should be that single point of contact for the sales. But you also have service, you also have CSRs, you have all these other people that are answering the phones and they're dealing with the clients as they're calling in. So consistency with that intake process. Make sure that we have it written out. Make sure we have scripts. Make sure we have an interview form and the questions that we're going to ask to assure we're sending the right person. So there's nothing more disappointing to a client if they call and we send the wrong person out. Now we've wasted their time. And just as an example, and I've seen it happen in my business, and I've also seen it happen in clients' business as well, where we'll send a service technician out, but when they get there, the client's like, well, I was wanting a quote for a change out, not for a service. Well, then that makes the technician look bad. Then the homeowner's mad. Now they've taken off time from work. We've already wasted their time. So what are the chances that they're actually going to purchase from us? We've already let them down before we've even given them an estimate. So just making sure that we're delivering high level of client care during the call intake process to control or air traffic control them to the right person, and doing a great job of passing that client to the next person that they have to talk to without them having to repeat themselves, all that good stuff. It's just some of the little things that we can do to assure a consistent flow. Just have it written out, have a process, train on it. That's where a lot of people fail, is training their team. Train, train, train. You hire somebody new, you need to have it written out. Because if you don't have it written out, as we're implementing new processes, everybody's trained on it, but you have a new person come in, they haven't been originally trained on it. Is somebody going to take the time to go back to the beginning, write it out? That's the biggest thing.
Well, and that's a challenge for a lot of business owners because they are technicians at heart. They are contractors. And to step into that role of being the entrepreneur and being able to lead a team and also being a manager of that team in the short term, because we don't have managers yet. We are every role in our business. But taking the time to pause and reflect and think through, what is it that I want this experience to be like? How is it that this person can deliver and over deliver for our customers on a daily basis? It's really difficult to do.
It is. Time is everything. So if you have a strong team member, and what I like to say is you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. If you're listening to this and you're a CSR, if you're listening to this and you're a dispatcher, be a part of driving that change and be a part of driving that success in that customer service. That's what I did. I was not a manager until we were probably my 7th or 8th year into the industry. And the things that I did to drive customer service, to drive the communication, and just trying to take care of my owners that were out there working, I wanted to not pass every little bitty problem to them all the time. So I kind of took charge of it when I was in the role. And so that was why it was kind of a natural transition into the service manager role for me when we decided to departmentalize. Little changes, it doesn't have to be gigantic leaps. Just be nice. That's the number one rule of customer service. Just be nice. Because if you're nice and if you're taking care of that customer, I mean, they're investing a lot of money in us these days. It's not cheap to get those AC. It's not even cheap for repairs anymore, right? So, and our end goal is always to deliver a really high level of client care so we can earn that referral for the next person.
Correct.
Well, and you like that whole be nice part. I think a lot of people miss that, but you think about that in like the ability to just have a human connection. I think a lot of people miss, and I've used this story before. There's we call one of our doctor's office. And luckily, I don't call the doctor's office too terribly often, but when I do, the lady on the other end is not a nice person. And if it wasn't a family friend, well, guess what? We probably wouldn't go back to that doctor because of the experience that we have on that end. You think about, the CSRs, they're one of the most important parts of the business because they're the people that are likely the first impression, right? And you have to make sure that they're trained and they're the right way. But to go back to the driving change, be leader, it's actually funny. We literally just talked about that with Michelle from Pink Collars on before, is that if you want to enact that in your business, if you want to impart that change, well, anybody at any organization in any level can be a leader. If you're struggling with that as an individual, I mean, you picked it up quite quickly. But if somebody were to come to you and say, hey, Catherine, I want to become a better leader in my role within this business, I just don't know where to start, what would you tell them?
Self-help books are great. John C. Maxwell has a whole group of books that are amazing. Attitude 101, Equip 101, Relationships 101. Start small, start small. There are so many different avenues that we can take towards self-improvement. And no matter how good anyone or any process is, there's always room for improvement. So seek out what you can through books, watch videos, podcasts. We at BDR are a coaching facility. If your company is interested in coaching facilities, look us up. We're business development resources. I teach lots of training classes, and we have a lot of virtual training classes. One of my classes that I teach online is the customer experience coordinator, which is developed around delivering that high level of client care all around the sales process, and end goal, looking for that referral on how do I build. So go seek the training out there, go find different avenues on, and bring it to the table to your owners and to your managers. Let them know what's out there that maybe can help us improve it. I was lucky and fortunate enough to have a lot of transferable training in the customer service world. In the fitness industry, that was my first industry, my first career. And I was able to take a lot of what I learned in that and just motivating people and getting people to show up and just have fun. And that was always part of my motto: make it fun and they're going to come. Who wants to go to work and be miserable all day?
Right.
So I took a lot of that and kind of just transferred it into my role when I stepped into the HVAC world. Same difference, go whenever you're experiencing anything out there. If you go to just any particular company, any kind of services, and you love how you're being treated and you love the customer service, that you start learning from that. I learned from every place I ever go to, whether it was a good experience or a bad experience. I always learned something, either what to do or what not to do. And if you just live life and you go out there and you just start observing, you can learn and pick up so many different things just from your everyday activities of going to the grocery store, of going to a drive-through somewhere, just based on how they treat you and how they make you feel. But go look for it.
It's interesting. When you talk to a lot of people who have failed to hit a goal, business owners that failed in their business and had to shut it down, more often than not, when you ask them why, it comes down to a lack of resources. Didn't have the money, didn't have the capital, didn't have the right connections, didn't have the right people. And the reality is that if you had the resourcefulness instead of the resources, you would find a way. Like you said, go read the books. They all exist. They're all out there, right? Hire the coaches, hire the trainers, hire the mentors. All of these things are solvable and they already exist. And you can compress those decades into days by leveraging other people's experiences.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why BDR exists.
One of the things you also mentioned earlier is referrals. And I would be remiss, because I titled it How to Get More Referrals in Your Business, that we didn't talk about that. And now, obviously, all the things we're talking about are leading up to the referral. But if you're doing all of this and you're still not getting referrals, because let's be honest, a lot of businesses miss the mark on the referral component of things, where does somebody start to try to get more referrals? Which, by the way, referral marketing, I will say, is one of the most powerful forms of marketing that exists. It is just not scalable for your business.
Great question. Referrals. It's just so many opportunities to plant the seed for referrals. And if you're getting compliments and we're not planting the seed for referrals, you're missing the opportunity. It starts with delivering that great client care. We all get compliments. You're taking a phone call, you get a compliment during the call intake process. The salesman goes out, home solution advisor, he gets a compliment, she gets a compliment. Installers, they get a compliment. Service techs, every time we get a compliment is an opportunity to start planting that seed and just start building that cultural driven seed planting of, we want your referrals. Please send us your business. And it's as simple as saying something like, hey, Mrs. Jones, thank you so much for providing me that feedback. We do our best to deliver a high client care because you're more likely to send your family and friends to us if you're happy with what we're doing. Start planting that seed and you make that part of your culture. And they're hearing that multiple times throughout all of the steps and touches throughout their experience with you. Make yourself present out there. Go talk to people, join the associations. And, when you're sponsoring baseball teams and you're doing all these little things and you're going in country clubs, whatever the case may be, wherever you have a chance to put some type of sponsorship in place, that helps you drive referrals. And I have an example of a client that was very high demanding. She was very high demand. She had very high expectations, but she was very well to do in the community. And she did not have a price point. Like, price was not an issue with this customer, right? It's everybody's dream customer as far as giving me your money, right? But she had very high expectations. So we had to deliver a really high level of client care. And when we get referrals from her, I'll never forget the very first one that I got. I was kind of like the single point of contact for this lady. And went all the way from when I was a dispatcher all the way through to service manager and general manager. She always asked for me because I was that person for her. And she'd send a referral and they would call. And the funny thing is she says, Miss Jackie had referred you to us and we're not going to get any other prices. And I was like, wow, okay. She's like, do you want to know why? I'm like, yeah, do tell. Why? And she's like, well, me and my husband were talking and we figured if you can keep Miss Jackie happy, you must be freaking phenomenal. Those were the best referrals, right? Now, the interesting thing that happens and what I like to tell people is don't be afraid to deal with an unhappy customer, because in doing the research for my customer experience coordinator class, I came across what's called the service recovery paradox. You can Google it. It's there. It's a pretty cool paradox. But what it does, it shows you a graph of a timeline of a customer that's been with you, right? And then you have a line for a customer who's never had a service failure, and then a line for a client who's had a service failure and how they dip off. And then all of a sudden, they will become more loyal and spend more money with you quicker than somebody who's never had a service failure before. And Miss Jackie, that lady that I was talking about, was one that I experienced that with. We had a service failure with her. I took care of her. I followed up. I made sure she was happy. And she started referring us unbelievably after we took care of her. And I didn't have to, every single person that she sent to me, there was no price concern. They were all, people are friends. They're similar buying habits, similar incomes, things like that. Never had an issue with any of them. And that's the kind of referrals we want all the time, right? Referrals come with higher closing ratios. They come with a higher average job. They're easier to do work with. They've already researched your company. They already know about you. So you don't have to really go sell the business because they're seeking you out. So going after those referrals through customer service is your number one goal. Deliver a high level of client care and they will come. Plant the seed for referrals. Please send me your family. I want people to send me their friends and family. Talk to them about it. It has to be talked about in meetings and trained to the entire team. Everybody who talks to a customer should be trained on how to deliver that scripting for planting the seed for referrals.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on referral bonuses? And there's two different types that I'm going to think on here. One is obviously for the customer that refers. But the other one is if somebody asks for a tech by name because that tech did a great job and the family referred them and like, hey, I want Evan to come out to my house because he's better than that Thaddeus guy. So there's
true fact, by the way.
Fact, right? Yeah, you're welcome for the compliment. Normally I'd say it the other way around, but I'm like, you know what? I'll play nice today. I was kind of railroading him a little bit before we got on. Catherine's like, are these guys brothers? And I'm like, no, just business partners. She's like, that explains it. But the two different types of bonuses. So the one for the customer that refers in, but then for the team, if they get referred by name.
Absolutely. We had a system in place for of course, our customers. When our customers send us a referral, I wanted to reach out to them personally. Hey, thank you for sending me your friend. We took care of them just like we did you. Assure them that we did, because nobody wants egg in their face. If they refer somebody and they don't show up, that looks bad on them. So they're worrying. They're wondering, did they take care of them? Call them and let them know that we took care of them, and send them a gift card. We had a $100 gift card to one of our local restaurants that we would send to our clients that referred them to us. As far as our employees, absolutely. If our employees are out there doing what we're asking them to do, they should be rewarded for that. If they're asking for referrals, if they're giving their business cards. We had an installer that he had more people and more leads came in through him because he took the time to stop and talk to them when they came out of the neighborhood. They'd catch him at his truck. Hey, here's my card. I got to get back to work, but please give us a call. He'd give him his card every time, and they would call and ask specifically for him. We spiffed him a lead spiff for that. Why not? It's not costing you anything in advertising because they're talking to him and he's turning that over. So rewarding your team members for that it's amazing. We used to do contests on where leads would come from, like who can get the original leads. And we were constantly coming up with new ideas on how to handle, or where can we put our promotional items. We had newsletters. We left them in the stacks of magazines at dentist office, doctor's offices. We had pens. We would talk about, let's leave them in the checks at the restaurants, for the waitresses and stuff. We had magnets, and one day we got a lead came in, and we always asked how you referred to us. Always ask that. And the lady says, well, I got your magnet off of a gas pump. What? A gas pump? Oh, like, okay, this is interesting. Yeah. So what happened? Lady was like, well, I left my house this morning. I forgot to stop and get gas. It's daylight savings time. It got dark early. She says, I'm frustrated because now I got to stop and get gas. I worked late. It's dark. Stopping at the gas station. My husband's calling me as I'm pulling up, and he's freaking out on the phone, telling me that the air conditioner is broken. You need to do something about this. And he's screaming at me. I get out the car and I look up, and there's your magnet. It was meant to be. That was a $22,000 job we sold 10, 12 years ago. It was an amazing job. So the next meeting, because our magnets didn't have names on them. So I said, who's putting magnets on a gas pump? And one technician raised his hand. And he says, did we get a lead from it? I said, we most certainly did. And I gave him $100 spiff right there in the meeting for it. Nice. And unfortunately, they stopped they started making gas pumps. They're using aluminum on them now. So you can't stick them on there anymore.
Stickers.
Now you need a sticker. Harder to peel off.
But we used to stick them on the side of Coke machines, like you're coming out of the grocery, and there's this big side of the Coke machine sticking out there. So I'd stick all my magnets on them. There's just so many things that we can do to create fun, right? Hey, how can we get a lead? Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And as it's coming back in and we're finding out where they're coming in from, we reward them for it.
Makes sense. The one caveat with spiffs is just make sure that you talk to your local HR expert. Ian Shotanis might be able to help you out there with HR guy, or anybody else, to make sure that you're doing it above board, right?
Absolutely.
And not potentially hindering your employees, because that is the one caveat I will give on that. But they are a great way, because people like those rewards, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The thing that I love about all of this is the intentionality behind it. And that's, what you had said about referrals being something that is difficult to control. This is taking a little bit more control, and arguably as much control as you possibly can when it comes to referrals, and being intentional behind it. And right from the CSR, asking for it, letting them know, like, this is our goal. When the technician shows up, our goal is not to sell you anything today. Our goal is that you like us enough that you can introduce us to a couple more families that may need us, right? Being intentional about that process. And I remember as a comfort advisor, I took my Cutco approach. Well, I used to sell Cutco knives. Thaddeus did too. It's where we met. And I took my Cutco approach on generating referrals. At the time, we were doing all Home Depot leads, and we were getting paid less on those. So I said, well, I'm going to generate my own appointments. And I did. I filled up the entire next week after I asked for permission on whether or not I can generate my own referrals. Entire next week was all my appointments. And then they were frustrated because we had Home Depot leads that couldn't get booked into my schedule. But no, it's being intentional behind it and having a process of how to do that, which again comes back to, are you documenting what it is that you expect?
If we're going to do it, you have to document it. You have to track it.
Yep.
And someone internally needs to do the tracking. There are a lot of complaints from service technicians, installers on spiffs. And if they're responsible for tracking their own spiffs, they get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we have a good tracking process in place. If we don't track it, we can't manage it. And managing it is the number one reason. Lack of managing it is the number one reason why things fail.
Correct. It's true.
And I don't want my technicians coming in every day trying to meet with salesmen to see if their leads were sold, and because that's wasted time. I want them out there capturing the opportunity that they can capture too.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I definitely have to have a process for it.
Yeah. Well, and even when looking at fitness, coming back to that part of it, if you were tracking calorie intake, arguably one of the least efficient ways to track whether or not you're being healthy. But by tracking it, you're at least tracking something, and you're probably going to make better decisions in other areas as well.
Absolutely. And then you have a goal too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Set the goal. Another challenge with setting goals for service technicians, installers, salespeople is we just regurgitate a big number, right? Hey, you need to go do in a salesman, you need to go sell $200,000 this month. Well, what does that look like? How do we break that down?
Right.
Well, this is how many leads you need to do with your current closing ratio. What if we get our closing ratio up 10%? Then look how many less leads we have to run in order to do that. What is your average job? How many leads do I need with my closing ratio that I have to go run in order to hit that based on my average job? What if we get that average job up a little bit? Give them a goal for daily. Give them a daily, weekly, monthly goal, and break it down into bite-sized pieces. Same thing with service technicians. If I tell them, oh, you need to go sell 35 agreements this month, they're going to look at me like, what? Hey, you need to sell 1 per day, right? 1.5 per day. It's all you need to do. Break it down into daily. You need to, if we give them a daily goal on what they need to make on their truck, right? How many service calls do I need to run with the current average ticket? What if I get that average ticket up by $50? How many calls will I need to run then? And break it down into a daily, weekly number versus just a big number for a whole month, because it scares them. But if we can break it down into bite-sized pieces, it makes it a little bit more palatable for them, and they can go after it and go hit those goals.
Well, and as a general manager too, taking the seat of, well, if we want to grow 30%, do we need to grow sales by 30%? Or can we grow 2% in every department all the way through the funnel?
That's a great point. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's fun working the math backwards. It's like how, and to make a 2% improvement, to be 2% better at booking a call, to be 2% better at getting the call to the right technician at the right time, to be 2% better on callbacks, to be 2% better in your average ticket and 2% better in your closing ratio. The difference that makes at the end of it is incredible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's still the same end goal. We're just looking at it from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. If somebody wants to reach out, bdrco.com. There we go. bdrco.com is their website. If they want to reach out to you directly, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn at Catherine Barris. You can look me up there, or my email address at catherinebarris@bdrco.com.
All right. I will save that, and hopefully I spelt it right. Looks like I did. I had a typo earlier today. The team went to bat, fixed it for me. So Catherine Barris at bdrco.com. We'll make sure that we put those inside the show notes for after. So, but as we do wrap up, of course, we got one final question. What is one question that you wish people would ask you more, but don't?
That's a hard one. I don't know. I've never thought about it from that standpoint. Now you got me thinking like our keynote speaker, just like you got to put yourself in, you got to think about you, not necessarily what's around you. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
We asked her that question last night when she was on her podcast, and she sat there for what felt like a minute, but it's probably only 30 seconds of thinking. And she's like, that's a tough question.
It is a tough question. Can I circle back to you in a day or two, and I'll send it to you?
That's some deep thought.
That is some deep thought. So
awesome. Catherine, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for making the time. Sorry we couldn't get you in yesterday when you stopped by and Thaddeus was just gone somewhere. So I'm glad we were able to make it work today. And I know this has been a great event for you. You got a chance to speak in your own breakout and delivered some value to everyone in the audience as well. So thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for adding value to our audience too. And until next time.
And as BDR would say, wahoo.
Wahoo. Let's do a Wahoo all together. 3, 2, 1.
Wahoo!
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed. Before you go, 2 quick things. First off, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. The other thing, if you took one tiny bit of information out of this show, no matter how big, no matter how small, all we ask is for you to introduce this to one person in your contacts list. That's it. That's all. One person. So they too can unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Until next time, cheers.